अपादिमौलिपर्यन्तां गुरुणामाकृतिं स्मरति न विघ्नप्रणश्यन्ति सिद्ध्यन्ति मनोरथाः लक्ष्मीतनोतुनितरामितरानपेक्षमङ्घ्रिद्वयं निगमशाकिशिखाप्रवालं भैरम्बमम्बुरुहडम्बरचौर्यनिक्रं विघ्नाद्रिभिः सर्वेषां स्वागतम्. This is the Bhāvārtha session for the 33rd shloka. So the 33rd shloka is Dehendriya prana manaschidatmanam Sanghadajastram parivartate dhiyah Vrittistamo muulatayajnalakshana Yavad tavadasau bhavodbhavah Dehendriya prana manaschidatmanam Sanghadajastram parivartate dhiyah Vrittistamo muulatayajnalakshana Yavad tavadasau bhavodbhavah. So after understanding that because the Atma is within the realm of the Panchakoshas, and because the Panchakoshas have the Trigunas, it is influenced by the three states and it is only a reflection. And then, but truly speaking, it is only an illusion. In true sense, the Brahma Tattva is non-dual, it is always auspicious, and it is supreme. We are trying to understand more about what brings about that Sharira. So, Deha Indriya, excuse me, Deha Indriya Prana Manaha. Dehendriya Prana Manaha. So, these are the equipments. We talked about Sharira as a whole. Here, we are talking about within that, what are the equipments. So, there is the Deha, that is the Sura Sharira, whatever, the total packaging. Then we have the Indriyas, the sense organs. Then the Prana, what moves around, the Pranavayu. And then Manaha, Chit, Atmana. These are the complete constituents of a body of living Sharira. Sanghatat, together they become, they bring to the complex mechanism. Ajastram is endlessly. Sanghada Jastram. Sanghada Jastram. Sanghat Ajastram. Parivartate dhiyah. Parivartate is to change. Dhiyah, the vritti, the changes. Here we are seeing the vritti, the mind, the intellect. It gets manipulated by all these things. The first thing to be born out of the Mula Prakriti is Mahat. When it is subjected to these things, it starts to develop different things, different like for example, Mahat is just intellect. So it is the information processing capability. So now I'm taking in some information, some normal information, some characteristic of a person. That person is tall, this person is short. But it is not necessary that I have to discriminate between them. That let me categorize them as short. Let me categorize that this person as long. That is brought about by something that arises out of that Mahat. Like for example, when we go for research, there is so much data available. Based on the data, based on the different kinds of samples that we can avail, we start to think about how to categorize them, what kind of sampling to take place based on the size of the population. So, like that, Deha, Indriya, Prana, Manaha, Chit, Atmana. These five constituents, when they form the physical attributes, because Manas, we are talking about, when we talk about the Mahat, the Buddhi is initially affected only by the sthitis, that is trigunas. Based on that, it is affected, so it can process that kind of information, the prakasha, then the inertia or this thing, the sattva, it can process. The vrittis, however, it depends on the different kinds of equipments that is at its disposal. Like, for example, I need to make a calculation. For that particular calculation, if I have a human brain, I have to go by those methods that the human brain knows. Abacus or Vedic maths or any of the maths that we have learned, arithmetic, etc., etc. When the instrument at disposal is a calculator, then the input and output process is different. Input cannot be the same nature as what a human brain can understand. Human brain will understand through charges. So for this thing, that is not the case. It has to understand in its computing language. And the output is also going to be what it is programmed to output. That means whatever 1 to 9, whatever is the number, 0 to 9, whatever is the number, that only it can show. In the same way, if we go for a mathematical computation to be done by a computer, much advanced. So computer is able to process bigger numbers, better functions. So a human brain, let us say, have to find out a square root might take more time. But for a computer, it is much easier. But the process, the way it processes the information also is not verbal or through a language that humans can process. It will use binary code. So like this, because of the instrument that is at the disposal of the buddhi, deha, indriya, prana, manaha, chit, atmanam. Because of all these things that is combined, we prepare a sharira. That is sharira. Sharira is yukta of all these things. Then it will start to process. It will start to understand the information in that particular way, and then it will start to process and give an output that is suitable to that what the instruments can only process. That is the reason we say when a disabled person, when there is a person who cannot, for example, not is blind, his other senses are sharp because the instrument that is at his disposal are less. So obviously the buddhi is trying to make use of all the of the instruments that is at its disposal. So if out of the 5 sense organs, if there is no drishti, then one type of uh, information cannot be processed, visual information. So then what other kind of information can be processed? Touch. So obviously the sense of touch will be heightened. In the same way, hearing, it will be sharp. Smell, taste. So these things sharpen because the information has to be processed. And obviously the output will also not be equal. The output will also not be equal. It will be different. Like for example, for a person who can see, he can see and he will associate the word immediately to that particular akriti. Because shape, rupa, becomes very brilliantly registered due to color and all that. So if I see a phone and I say it's a phone, then immediately I know this shape is something that a phone looks like. So I don't need further information on that. But for a person who doesn't have that drishti, he lacks that particular information. So that information has to be fed to him through some other way, through feeling, through touch. So that person has to first touch, he has to understand. And his understanding will have to be validated again by one more phone, maybe. Okay, all phones are like this. It has a certain attribute. So anything that I see like this, we can say it's a phone. So therefore, this particular instrument, it manipulates the buddhi to be used in a certain way only. So Deha, Indriya, Prana, Manaschidatmanam, Sanghata Jastram Parivartate Dhyaha. So it changes, Parivartate. So it identifies. So this is where the Aham Bhava arises. Because it has to customize itself to that particular um, instruments that is at its disposal, it will get more accustomed to them. When it gets more accustomed to them, then there is an attachment, then there is an identification. So I go to some new city, I don't know anybody over there. I see somebody who speaks the same language, my mother tongue probably. Obviously, there is a recognition and attachment and therefore discrimination. When I discriminate as somebody who is close to me and who is away from me, then I'm creating identity. Self identity also comes over there because it is me who is getting attached. I'm identifying that person as somebody who's close to me. So there arises ahambhava. So the inner equipments, which is preceded over by the self, come to identify with the body. When it comes to identify with the body, the sense organs, the prana, the mind, and so on, etc., etc., it creates ahambhava. So, sanghadajastram parivartate dhiyaha. Vrittis lakshana. So, vritti, vrittihi tamomoolataya. Tamomoolataya agnya lakshana. Agnya is knowledge. Agnya is ignorance. Agnya lakshana. So when the manipulation of what we can process, what we cannot process, that leads to an avaraka, a sense of shield or cover, where the tamas, due to tamas state of buddhi, where because of the tamomulataya, because of that, it leads to agnya lakshana. That means that leads to ignorance. So because there are three states of the trigunas is leading to three states of the buddhi. Because of that particular, in that particular three states, when it is tamomulataya, when tamas is influencing more, and then the deha indriya is manipulating it accordingly, then what happens is the self doesn't change. The buddhi, it starts to become ignorant in nature. And at that point of time, yavat bhavet tavadasau bhavodbhavaha. Bhavaha means samsara. Bhava udbhavaha means origin or birth of samsara, birth in samsara. So as long as this keeps happening, as long as the nature, the tamo mulataya lakshana is stemming out, as long as we are not able to realize the true nature of Brahman, which is due to the avaraka, the agnya lakshana that our buddhi has adopted or has given rise to, we will obviously keep taking birth in that particular bhavaha. That means in the samsara, we will keep taking birth. This is the Bhāvārtha for this shloka. प्रजाभ्यः प्रतिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महीमहिषा गोब्राह्मणेभ्यो शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु कायेन वाचा मनसेन्द्रियैर्वा बुद्ध्यात्मना वा प्रकृते स्वभावात् करोमि यद्यत् सकलं परस्मै नारायणायेति समर्पयामि।